Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode. Thanks for tuning in. I've gotten really good feedback on doing 5 basic fishing tips that you need to know. I've done 2 of those previously. I'll link the second one to the end of this video so that you guys can go back and watch it if you haven't done so already. But basically, what I'm doing is I'm providing 5 quick, simple tips that should hopefully help you be more productive as an angler, regardless of species. Yes, these are geared more towards bass, but having this basic knowledge generally helps you, regardless of species that you're fishing for. So I think it's really valuable, and a lot of you guys really enjoy these because they're quick, simple tips that sometimes I think I take for granted, but I know a lot of you guys out there are new to the sport and have some basic questions. And I think a lot of times these help answer those. But at the same time, they are also in depth and they help everybody, or they reinforce ideas that you may have known but didn't really comprehend fully. So it's something that I think everyone can grow from, and I think they've been really good and people seem to enjoy them. So I'm going to keep doing these 5 basic fishing tips that you need to know. Before I do start, I want to remind you, if you're looking to support the channel, you can go into the video description, click the link to thereelshot.com. You can use the discount code STEFAN10 to get 10% off your order. They've got a great selection of fishing gear, outdoor gear, hunting gear, pretty much anything you need. It's a local Wisconsin shop here, so you can support them, and it's a great cause. Also, if you're looking for a little help on your local lake, you can go to fishthemoment.com, click the lake breakdown section, and myself, Randy Blockett, and Johnny Morris are all doing lake breakdowns on lakes around the country. If we have not done one for you already, you can request a personal lake breakdown as well, so we can do that. Really good way to help you guys kind of break down your lakes and see through the eyes of a professional and how we would approach those lakes. Okay, guys, so we're going to get into the 5 basic tips. Like I said, I've done 2 other videos of these, so these are technically tip 11 through 15. And a couple of these really are not necessarily fishing tips, but fishing gear tips. And the first one I want to talk about has to do with the rods that you're using. One of the number one questions I get has to do with the suggested lure weight rating that's on each rod. You need to know that that lure weight really does not have any true justification other than it's a suggestion by the rod manufacturer as to what size lure or what weight will perform the best with that rod. It doesn't mean, if the rod, if the lure weight suggestion is a 1/4 ounce to 3/4 ounce, if you go over 3/4 ounce, it does not mean you'll break the rod. It doesn't necessarily mean you'll void the warranty on the rod even. It just means if you're throwing over 3/4 ounce, you need to make sure that when you're casting, you're loading the rod up nice, smooth, and casting very easily. You don't want to load up and just whip the rod, because that's when you could break the rod on the cast because you are overloading the rod. But it does not mean that you can't throw a bait that's lighter or heavier than the requirements. It is just a simple suggestion as to this is what the manufacturer thinks that rod will perform the best with. Very often I'm throwing baits that are outside of that range because the technique that I'm utilizing is something where I just need to go with a lighter or heavier bait, and I like the way that rod performs. I've said before, and I'll say it again, that, guys, one of the worst things, in my opinion, that manufacturers are doing with rods is specifically stating on the rod a technique that rod is made for. Like, you can buy a rod that's made for flipping. Well, that flipping rod may not suit what I want, and it may not suit what you want. So if you go buy that rod thinking it's the ideal flipping rod because the manufacturer tells you it is, you may find that you don't like that rod at all. It would be better if they just continued to mark the rods as, this is the action, this is the weight, and this is the suggested lure use, because I think that's the best thing that they can do. But don't let the lure weight throw you guys off. It is just a suggestion by the manufacturer. So that's going to take me into my next tip or thing idea that I want to break down, which has to do with the question I get all the time. Do I prefer spinning rods or casting rods, or casting gear and spinning gear? And really the answer to this, guys, is I don't really mind using either one. And it's simply a matter of you should choose the rod and reel setup that works best for you to allow you to get the right performance out of both the rod and reel as well as the bait that you're using. Meaning, if you want to throw a bait caster with 6-pound test and an 1/8 ounce jig as a finesse rod, you can do that. You're probably going to have to match the bait casting rod to the bait and line that you're using, but you can make that work. Now, for me, I will not be nearly as accurate of a caster with that setup as I would be if I was throwing 6-pound test with an 1/8 ounce jig on spinning gear. So I choose to use spinning gear in that circumstance. But I know that there's a big movement going on right now of this finesse bait caster movement. If that is something that you think you can apply better than you can a spinning rod, then you should be doing it. If you feel more comfortable using a spinning rod over a finesse bait casting setup, stick with the spinning rod. The same thing goes for heavier baits. Most of the time, you throw bait casting gear with heavier baits because you feel like it performs better. But that does not mean that you have to throw a bait caster if you want to throw a crankbait. You can throw spinning reels and spinning rods with a crankbait. It just comes down to what performs better for you. So again, this is similar to how I feel about baits and fishing as a whole. Confidence is king in this. I truly believe the confidence that you have in your abilities and the equipment that you're using will lead to 50% of your success rate. If you feel better throwing spinning rods, then do it. If you feel better throwing bait casting rods, then do it. I don't think it's fair to criticize each other if somebody's throwing a rod and reel setup that you don't feel comfortable with, because it may feel better to them. So it's just another thing in the sport where the rod and reels are tools. If you think you're better with those tools than a different set of tools, you go with the tools that you feel best with. It just seems like that's the way it should be. So that's the second thing. The third thing kind of goes along with that. One of the most important things as an angler that you can do to increase your success rate is to be an accurate caster. So again, this goes with the rod and reel setup. You want to use the rod and reel that allows you to make the right cast. And you want to spend the time getting better at your casting accuracy, because on the water, that is one of the single most important things you can do to be a better angler. So if you've got a dock and you need to skip your bait under the dock to generate the bite, you got to learn how to do that. If you've got schooling fish that come up busting on the other side of the boat, you need to be able to turn and cast your bait in there accurately and quickly. If you miss by 10 feet, you may not get bit. If you can't skip your bait under a dock or cast your bait right next to a log, you may not get that fish to come and bite your bait. You will dramatically increase the number of bites you can get if you can accurately place your bait where you need it to go. One of the biggest, that's one of my strengths. I feel like I am very confident in my casting skills, and I'm usually not afraid to fish behind somebody else, especially if I know they're not really good at casting accuracy. If I'm fishing around and I see a guy go by, a dock or a tree, and they're casting 3 feet from the tree, I know the likelihood is that they may have caught a very active fish, but if there is not a very active fish in there, I can go back to that dock or, fish behind them and catch a fish that they missed. That's just how it is. And a lot of times, if you don't place your bait where it needs to go, you won't get that bite. So guys, casting accuracy is so important. I can tell you, up here in Wisconsin, especially in college, I spent a lot of time flipping into coffee mugs. In fact, in college, we used to have flipping contests in the dorm hallways. The first one to put 5 jigs inside the coffee cup won $1. And I I won a lot of beer money in college doing that. Let's just put it that way. But what that did is it's made me very accurate as a flipper. So I feel very, very comfortable doing that. And that's just something you can do at home. You don't have to be on the water for that. Now, if you want to learn to skip, yeah, it might be a little hard to do in your backyard. But if you're just looking for casting accuracy, you can actually practice that. That is one of the handful of things in the sport of fishing that you can practice without actually doing on the water. So that's the third thing. The fourth thing has to do with pre-spawn, which is coming up here, shortly for some of you guys, and has actually probably started already down in Florida. One of the best things you can do to increase your success rate for pre-spawn fishing is to look for the travel routes. You want to find the travel routes that take wintering fish from usually their deeper water winter spots to their spawning grounds. Some of the easiest and most simple spots to locate are those long stretches that are going to become travel routes for fish. They swim to them and they follow them. Riprap for, say, a bridge is a great one. Old road beds is a great one. Bluff walls is another good one. So basically what you have is you have a long straightaway. A lot of times it's more of a vertical wall that the fish swim into, and then they either go left or they go right, and they follow that. A riprap dike wall is a great example of it. With smallmouth, if you've got a lake that have road beds in it, a lot of times those smallmouth will come up out of deep water, get on a road bed, and they'll follow that road bed right to the bank. And then that road bed a lot of times will lead to a spawning pocket. So that's really a simple way to break down travel routes. If you're looking for the spot on the spot, the so-called sweet spot, if you can find any isolated cover along that road bed, along that riprap bank, along that bluff wall. So, I'm talking about a random boulder, a brush pile, a place where you get a little bit of a point that comes off of it. Anything like that is the sweet spot on it, and that's a location that fish will continue to come to and feed at. So if you're looking to break down the pre-spawn period, you want to locate where the fish were in the winter, where they're going to spawn, and try to find those paths in the middle. It doesn't need to be super difficult, and if you can find those sweet spots, you can find spots that just continuously reload and are really good almost year to year. If it's a hard structure, deeper water item, it can be a fantastic thing to do. The last thing I want to talk about, so this is tip number 15, the fifth one for the day, has to do with fishing big grass mats. One of the most intimidating things as an angler, at least for me originally, was how to break down giant grass mats. It's so common across the country to find a grass mat that could be, we're talking hundreds of acres or miles of shoreline. You need to be able to break that down quickly, because the last thing you want to do is just drift over a giant grass mat. You can easily strike out, but if you can find those sweet spots, you can really turn a bad day into a great day of fishing. The easiest way to do that is to first see if you can find any current flow along that grass. And I don't mean river current, I mean wind current. If you have wind blowing into grass mats, you will have current that runs along those edges of the grass mats. So you're looking for any points where you have current that would come off of the grass weed line edge, or where you have funnels. So if you've got two thick clumps of grass and the wind is blowing into it, that current will literally get pinched down. So what you're looking for are the sweet spots. That's the first thing that I look for. If I don't have any sort of wind, then I'll look for points in the grass or bare spots in the grass. Those are two really good spots that fish will use to feed in big grass mats. If you can identify those, you're generally going to find where the most active fish are. That's a good way to start and a good way to break down a giant flat. If I hit 4 or 5 good sweet spots in a big grass mat and I don't get bit, I'm probably leaving and going elsewhere. If I can find one sweet spot in that big grass mat and catch a couple fish off of it, I know they're using that big grass mat, and I'll spend more time trying to find more sweet spots in that area. But don't let a big grass mat intimidate you. You just want to try to identify the little spots amongst that big grass mat that will allow you to fish an area that's a high percentage area. The points, the weed lines, bare spots, if there's a little rock pile mixed in, if there's a tree mixed in, or if you have any sort of current that is being pushed and generated through that grass. Those are the key spots to look for. Hopefully that will help you break it down. It'll be a little less intimidating for you on the water. And hopefully you guys enjoyed these 5 tips. If you did, hit the like button. It tells me you enjoyed it. And I'll continue to do 5 simple basic fishing tips that we all need to know. Thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned. New video coming out tomorrow.